course, we're all possibly subconsciously very well aware of the fact that if we say anything nasty about Islam, we may find ourselves doing 7 years. But I don't care. I think it would be worthwhile doing 7 years for speaking the truth. And what I'm going to say is, first of all, the nonsense about how well other nations and faiths did under Islam. If you study the history of Spain, you will find out that the Jimmy, as they were known as, first of all, they paid an extremely heavy tax. Secondly, it was made plain to them in every way that they were second-class citizens, bound by every sort of petty restriction, even having to step aside in the road if a Muslim came. And worst of all, because Islam believes in slavery, it's written into the Quran, so of course it's fine. Every year, boys of 7 or 8 years old were taken away from their families to serve in the janissaries and also, interestingly, in the civil service in Muslim states. And these boys were taken away and were never seen again. And this, I think, was the hardest thing that these Jimmies had to face. Of course, there was from time to time, there were massacres, and there was a constant state of warfare in some parts of Spain, but otherwise they were fine. Otherwise it was a very happy state of affairs, as you said. But what I think is, personally speaking, is the worst feature of Islam, even worse than its licensing of slavery, its total lack of anything whatsoever resembling democracy in any form. The worst thing about it is its treatment of women. Now, I know this treatment does somehow lead to a certain popularity in certain Western places. Among the henpecked and the mum's boys, the thought that women are inferior, it is stated categorically in the Quran. Women are inferior and they have got to be under the power of a male relative from their birth to their death. And even at death they are in the power of a male relative because their husbands are allowed to say whether they can get to paradise or not. And you can't wonder that it's also stated with considerable pleasure by some Muslim theologian that hell is full of women. So I think there is only one possible solution to this problem, and that is to support and uphold in every way those very few, very brave Muslim women who are trying to fight the system. And I think that that is literally the only possibility that we have. Because Islam, let's face it, is fun for men. And, I mean, they can have 4 wives and as many slave women as they can get hold of. And they can go into their house knowing that they are superior. They are in charge. They can make the women do whatever they want them to do. And it is laid down in the Quran that if a wife refuses her husband anything, she can be flogged until she consents. That's in the Quran. And so you can see that certain type of man, it's really very nice. But women, well, there is one woman quoted in a remarkable book I recommend to you called Why I'm Not a Muslim, written by a man who lives in America. And he quotes a Pakistani woman saying, "It's hell to be a woman in Pakistan." And that is true for any other Muslim state. It is hell to be a woman. If a woman is raped, she has to have 4 male witnesses who actually saw it. Well, you can imagine how often that happens. And if she cannot prove it with 4 male witnesses, she is likely to be flogged again for having tempted the man. And there's only one hope, I think, and that is through the women. We should support Muslim women who are fighting for some sort of rights and freedom in any way that we can. And I think that if that happens, if the women can gain something, some tiny scrap of rights and self-respect, decent treatment, I won't sicken you by describing to you what's called female circumcision. But if you're interested, there is some literature on the subject. And they say there are something like 50 million women who suffer from it today, even in this country. And if these women somehow can be supported and helped, I think that is really the only hope. Because if women get freedom, Islam collapses. And so do most of the Muslims.
Actually, Sean, some of these things were notes I made during your speech. First of all, the irrelevant question occurred to me: if Catholics weren't allowed in armed forces, why were there so many Irishmen in the British Army at the time of the Napoleonic Wars? And I can't see the 3 million Muslims in Britain. First I've heard of it being that many. Where do you get it from? Now to get down to the nitty-gritty. On immigration, I am not a libertarian. I believe that we should only admit those who can read, write and speak fluent English, and that libertarian values are Western values. Very simply, these people, well, they are subversive of our values. They don't like to undermine them. Democracy, well, I believe in total free speech of the US First Amendment applying everywhere, but I have reservations about universal suffrage. I essentially believe that people who can't read shouldn't be able to vote either. My solution would be to repeal the Race Relations Act and all these anti-discrimination laws, abolish the industry they've thrown up, end multiculturalism, all official documents to be in English, these vile customs like forced marriages, female sex in ritual slaughter, those commitments should be deported, and we should, I really do about Muslim women, we should stop being so defeatist and apologetic, say that our way of life is better. We should say that quite unequivocally. You're offended, so be what?
Okay.
On this question of women, it's interesting. An American anthropologist I know who actually went so far as to go...
And finally, when it comes to Big Brother, 300 years ago they went to gulp at lunatics in Bedlam. Now we have Big Brother reality TV. I suppose you might call that progress.
Live among the people he was studying, which was the American Indians. And I will not call them Native Americans, because anyone born in America is a Native American.
Hear, hear.
And cowboys and Native Americans just won't do. So they are Indians to me, And he went and he lived among them and studied them at grassroots level. And he said one of the main reasons for the subjugation of the Indians was that squaws wanted to marry white men. Because if they did, they'd be the only wife. They wouldn't have to drown their girl babies. They wouldn't face being turned out into the desert to die of starvation when they were old. And when the brave rode ahead on his war horse, they wouldn't have to tramp behind carrying the babies and the luggage. And they would sit beside their husbands on the seat of the buggy. And of course there was such an overwhelming number of men to women in the West at the time, they were glad to marry anybody. And probably after being used to American women, they were awfully glad to have squaws who'd been trained to be subject to their men. And so it was something that suited all people. So you see, silly as it may seem to you, the approach to women is probably not such a bad idea.